I've had the same smart lock on this door since we moved in and it's worked out great, but there's been one big problem: no doorknob. So in this video, I'll solve this issue with a Sequra Smart Doorknob from Holomarq. Oh yeah, and it's got thread. Let's get into it. Greetings Internet, my name is Dustin and this is myHomeKithome, and here we look at the smart home with an Apple Home and accessibility focus. So as you saw, my studio door was in desperate need of an upgrade, so I was stoked whenever Holomarq released their Sequra Smart Doorknob and sent one over for a review. And although they did provide a review unit, they did not sponsor this video, and as always, I'm going to give it to you guys straight and let you know what I think from my own perspective. Now, there is a non-Apple Home version of this smart doorknob, so if you're interested, definitely check out the affiliate links in the description box so you make sure you get the right one. And I was also able to get a promo code so you can save a bit of money too. So we'll get it installed, set up in Apple Home, and then I'll share my experience with you after having used it for a couple of weeks, including the good and the not so good. But first, we need to get it out of its box and look at some of its features. Alright, let's break this thing down. The Holomarq Sequra Smart Doorknob is a latch style lock typically found on interior doors or others that maybe don't meet the security needs of a deadbolt. The HomeKit version currently comes in two colors, the matte black version that I have here and metallic gold. The Sequra connects to HomeKit over Thread with Bluetooth as a backup and uses Apple Home Managed Access, storing up to 50 PIN codes, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This smart doorknob features a backlit keypad on the face of the knob as well as a mechanical key as a last resort, though it does have a USB-C port to give you enough juice to use the keypad in the event that the batteries die before you're able to replace them. The Sequra uses 4 AA batteries, which should get you at least 6 months of use, but probably more since it does connect over Thread and doesn't need to engage and disengage the latch like a smart deadbolt does. It also has an IP54 rating, so you should be good using it on exterior doors, barring any tornadoes or torrential monsoons. Now, before we get into the installation, we've got some disassembling to do, so let's really break this thing down. Out of the box, you'll notice that you get a few accessories like the strike plate, some screws, and the mechanical keys, but we need to take it apart before we get it installed. Holomarq did a great job with their installation video, which I'll link in the description, but I'll do my best to describe the steps if you learn better that way. And it ain't hard, but if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. All you'll need for this one is a Phillips head screwdriver, and we'll start off by removing the cover of the interior knob opposite the keypad one by unscrewing the screw in the center. Gently pull the cover off, exposing the battery compartment and the data cable, which is what you really need to be careful with. You'll notice 2 compartments for 2 AA batteries. On either side of these compartments, you'll find the 2 screws which secure the 2 sides of the doorknob. Unscrew these to separate the doorknob into 3 parts: the interior unit with the battery compartments, the latch itself, and the exterior doorknob with the keypad. Be extra careful when separating the 2 sides of the doorknob so you don't damage the data cable, which is connected to the keypad side of the knob. Now that you have the doorknob disassembled, begin the installation by first installing the latch bolt using the separately included screws, adjusting it for your specific back set, either 60 or 70 millimeters. Next, grab the exterior knob with the keypad and begin first by feeding the data cable through the center hole and inserting the knob into the latch bolt by aligning the screw posts. Mine held itself up just fine with gravity, but you might find it useful to use the piece of tape to hold the exterior knob in place while you install the interior assembly. Position the interior assembly with the reset button and data port facing out, then gently feed the data cable through the center of the interior knob until it pops out the other side. Now, the first time I did this, I mistakenly forgot to make sure that the cable fed all the way through and actually screwed in the knob before realizing my mistake, so don't do that. Now, line up the screw holes of the interior unit horizontally to match the screw posts from the exterior knob. It can sometimes be a little tricky to get them lined up just right, but something I found useful is to insert one of the screws and get it threaded just a little bit before inserting the other screw and getting it threaded before going all in.
20 minutes later.
Make sure everything is tightened down, connect the data cable. By the way, be gentle, it only goes in one way.
That's what she said.
Put in the batteries, and Bob's your uncle. Well, kind of. I recommend setting it up in the app before adding the interior cover, since 1, you need to press and hold the reset button for a few seconds until you hear a couple of beeps to put it into pairing mode, and 2, the HomeKit code is easier to scan. Yeah, there's probably another copy of it in the paperwork, but I couldn't find it. Give me a break.
I'm blind.
Now, the installation was pretty painless, especially if you've installed deadbolts or other doorknobs in the past. I'd say the hardest part was getting the data cable to feed properly and installing the batteries, and that wasn't hard at all. And if a blind guy like me can do it, you've definitely got a fighting chance. So now let's get it into Apple Home and have a look at some of its software features. The Holomarq Sequra has a fairly standard setup process, starting first by scanning the QR code, putting it in a room, and giving it a name. However, the Sequra supports HomeKit Managed Access, which allows for PIN code, home key, and Siri sharing across all supported smart locks in your Apple Home. Don't get confused though, the Sequra does not support Apple HomeKey, but we'll talk more about Managed Access in a moment. Once you set up or skip setting up a PIN code, you can add it to any automations that Siri thinks will be good, like locking the door when everyone leaves home or when the door is closed. We'll tap done, and Bob's your uncle. As I mentioned in my review of the Airversa Purell, which falls under the same Sleep Point Innovations umbrella, their app isn't the most accessible for blind people. So I took some time with the Sequra Smart Doorknob without even opening their app, and I gotta say that the experience was pretty nice right in Apple Home. One of the main features of this latch lock is that it connects over Thread, which means you'll get all of the same speed and reliability you've come to know from that connectivity. In your Thread network, it acts as a sleepy end node device, which means it won't help relay messages from other Thread devices. And although it's called sleepy, there's nothing tired about its reaction time, and I found it to be extremely responsive, especially compared to the Bluetooth smart lock I had on the door before. One of the beautiful things about a Thread network, among many others, is that you don't really need to do anything to get a device set up in that network. It just happens automatically. I did need to reset my Thread border routers and wait a few moments for the device to start transporting over Thread instead of Bluetooth, but it was immediately recognized as a Thread device. One of the downsides is that you do need a Thread border router like a HomePod or Apple TV, but I imagine that you already have one of these devices if you're into Apple Home. Now, the Sequra is my first experience with HomeKit Managed Access, and I do like it, but it is slightly limiting. It allows you to manage HomeKey and PIN code access for your HomeKit Home's residents, but also guests, generating a random PIN code, or you can choose a specific code yourself. These can be changed or deleted at any point right in Apple's Home app, which is super convenient, but a big downside is that through Managed Access, we can't actually set up a schedule for when these codes are active. This is a limitation of HomeKit and not Holomarq, since we can set this up in the Sleep Point app, and we'll look at that in more detail in a moment. The last point I want to bring up here using this smart doorknob exclusively in Apple Home is that its anti-peek feature, which allows you to add digits before and after your actual PIN code, functions right out of the box without having to activate it in the Sleep Point app. I didn't think much of it, but this feature has actually given me a lot of peace of mind as a blind guy. I never really know who's watching from a distance or lurking in the shadows, and so this seemingly inane feature actually made me feel more secure when opening up the studio. Now, you may not be using this on an exterior door, but you may have kids roaming around, and as someone with a 2.5-year-old, I'm constantly surprised at just how observant she is, and I could totally see her remembering a 6-digit code. I've had the Holomarq Smart Doorknob installed for a number of weeks now, and it fits right into my Apple Home. Its build quality is solid, and it definitely feels like a premium accessory. It is slightly bulkier than a standard doorknob, but not overly so, and you get used to it pretty quickly. It definitely gives you the impression that whatever's on the inside is going to be safe, a lot like today's sponsor, Extra, and their smart wallets and accessories. Whether you go for their leather, aluminum, 18-karat gold, or even carbon fiber models, Extra's wallets are beautifully designed and solidly built. Holding up to 12 cards with a quick release button for easy access, all of Extra's wallets also feature RFID blocking tech that keeps your card details secure. I've been rocking their carbon fiber wallet for a while now, and I absolutely love it. But they just released a matte black aluminum card holder, which is super slick. All of Extra's products fit your smart lifestyle perfectly, and now exclusively as a myHomeKithome viewer, you can take up to 25% off your own Extra wallet and keep your cards physically and digitally safe and sound. Just use promo code myHomeKithome at checkout, or go to shop.extra.com/myHomeKithome. Something I was surprised about with this smart doorknob, but it actually makes total sense, is just how quiet it is. Since you don't actually need a motor to engage the latch like you do with a smart deadbolt, all you have is a barely audible click when the door locks and unlocks. Even the keypad is louder. Though I did of course test it with Siri and on the fly opening and closing it in Apple Home, I pretty much exclusively use it with the keypad, since that's just much faster than pulling out my phone, but not nearly as fast as a fingerprint scanner would be. Holomarq does make a non-HomeKit version of of this smart doorknob with a fingerprint scanner, so hopefully we see that integrated in the future. Like I said, I do prefer to stay in HomeKit whenever I can, but the SleepPoint app does give us some features that we can't get elsewhere. Now, in terms of settings, we obviously have the option to update the firmware, and I'm happy to say that there was one as soon as I opened up the app. Other than this, we can toggle the auto lock feature and set it from between 5 and 60 seconds, which isn't a ton of time in my opinion, but at least it's something. The only other real settings we can tweak are toggling the audible feedback and anti-peak feature. In terms of features not available in Apple Home, there is an activity log which I assume should give us features like who, when, and how the lock was used, but I had a hard time accessing this event log, and the events that I could see only gave me information like that the lock was manually unlocked or that there was an unknown turn. The good news is that it looks like in iOS 17 we'll be getting native event logs in Apple's Home app, and hopefully this gives us a clearer picture of the lock's use. I was able to get into the smart doorknobs pin code management, and thankfully we do have a few more options than we have with Apple Home Managed Access. We can create up to 50 pin codes for friends, family, and guests, but more importantly, we can restrict access to days of the week and times on those days, which is pretty clutch for this type of device. We can also create a one-time pin code and set it up so that it can only be used on a specific date at a specific time. The only thing I found a little weird is that unlike HomeKit Managed Access, the SleepPoint app doesn't have the ability to generate a random code for guests, so you'll have to think of one yourself, which isn't nearly as secure. I would have also liked to have seen a share sheet added to invited guests to more easily and quickly share their codes with them. Now, I mentioned earlier that I wasn't able to access the activity logs, and that's because the SleepPoint app is lacking a little in the accessibility department. I found a number of buttons that were not labeled, so I wasn't really sure what they did, and other elements were just text and not labeled as buttons, so I wasn't sure that that text was actually actionable. Also, other buttons are labeled, but not in ways that make it apparent what that button actually does. Lastly, the firmware update process was a little strange, with a collapsed dialog box appearing at the bottom of the settings menu after tapping update firmware. But for the most part, the SleepPoint app is pretty accessible. My favorite part of the smart doorknob by far is that its keypad has actual physical buttons instead of a stupid touch surface, which are the bane of my technological existence as a blind guy. I really like that there's audible feedback for the keypad, but if I'm being nitpicky, it is a little harsh and I would have preferred a softer, rounder tone. But I'm a little persnickety when it comes to sounds in general. All in all though, I'd say that the Sequra Smart Lock gets a passing grade for accessibility. The Sequra Smart Doorknob is kind of in a class of its own, at least in Apple Home. The only similar product that I'm aware of is the Yale Assure Lever Lock, and it takes a completely different design approach, works over Bluetooth, and is nearly 3 times the price. We've needed something like this in HomeKit for a while now, and I'm really glad to see it. What did I miss? What questions do you have? Let me know in the comments section down below. Also, don't forget to check out the links and promo code in the description, as well as our full written review on the blog over at myhomekithome.com. Follow us on all the latest and greatest social medias at myhomekithome, like the video if you did, and subscribe and turn on notifications to see more like it. Thanks for watching to the end, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.